Hey guys, it's Claire from Impactful People. I'm joined today by Merna, who is going to be talking to us about some management tips. So Merna, it'd be great if you could just give us a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, and thank you for having me here. I'm so excited. So my name is Merna. I'm the founder of Gray Matter HR. It's a HR consulting firm, just went live last month, so relatively new. I've been in the HR industry for 7 years. I've been privileged to be in HR department of one twice. So many experiences throughout the 7 years that it has fueled me to create Gray Matter HR so I can help small organizations kind of navigating through people operations, helping give them the tools to become successful and to start scaling their businesses.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you've got loads of experience that will be beneficial to our community as well. So thank you so much for making the time to speak to us.
Yeah.
I know there was some really key themes that when we were first talking, really around supporting first-time leaders and first-time managers. We know it can be, a really challenging transition for people when they move into these roles. So I'd love to know, what are your top things that you think people first moving into manager or leadership roles should be thinking about or aware of?
That's a great question. So I think when managers get the opportunity to grow into a leadership role, or when individual contributors are given the opportunity, they see it as a promotion. They're not really thinking about what comes with the territory. So one thing that I really like to talk to individual contributors about when they have this opportunity is, hey, right now you're an rock star, you're a performer. However, as a manager, you're going to have a team under you that is going to be looking up at you. You're kind of their North Star, helping them understand what that role entails, the difference between managing people and being an individual contributor. I think that's the first step in any kind of role transition.
I think that's a really valid point, and it's something that comes up really commonly in a lot of the conversations I'm having around companies aren't always great at setting those expectations, and not just small companies, but we see it a lot in small companies and might not have a HR team, or they might have a standalone person in those roles. So what would your advice be to managers if they're not getting that guidance from their company around what the expectations of a people manager is?
That's a really good question. I would say really keep your eye focused on your team. So if you do step into that role and you don't really have an HR department that you can lean on for guidance or training, I would recommend leaning into your team, setting up a one-on-one with your team members, understanding their concerns, and seeing how you can help coach them or help support them so that they can be successful in their roles. I think a lot of times as a first-time people leader, you want people to respect you. And so you use tactics like scare tactics to your team so that, you're leading with fear. And I think it should actually be the opposite. You should try to be leading with compassion and care and understanding. So really leaning in on your team, setting up dedicated time to have with them to listen to their concerns. That should instead be your North Star when you don't have leadership or an HR department to help guide you.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. That ability to listen and hear what your team's needs are, I think is key, whatever support you've got around you. So yeah, really, really good point. So some of the things we've touched on before in our conversations is how people create a safe environment. So I think to your point there, when you're leaning into your team, you need them to trust you. You want them to be as open and honest with you as possible. So how can people think about creating that safe space environment for their teams?
Great question. So I think transparency above all is the most important, especially as a new leader. you may think that you're expected to know the answers, but no one has all the answers. So being vulnerable with your team and just letting them know, like, hey guys, this is my first time in this role. Let's learn together. Let's grow together. I think that will give them, that will help show them that you're vulnerable, and help make it a little bit more of even a psychologically safer space for them to have that back and forth conversation. Another thing that's really important is being clear and consistent with your communication. So one thing that I always stress to new managers is, with your team, you need to time block meetings with your employees, so that you are able, number one, to check in with them, but number two, you need to have a touch base where you're letting them know how they're doing, what your expectations of them are, understanding if there are any roadblocks in their way, hindering their performance, and what you can do really to help them overcome those roadblocks. So I'd say transparency, having clear and consistent communication, setting those expectations for your team, and asking them. It goes both ways, really. Your employees should also tell you what they expect from you. So having that conversation, I think, will allow a leader to be successful in their role.
Yeah, you made a really good point there as well about vulnerability, and I think thinking you need to know it all, which I think is a common challenge when you're moving into people manager role, or you're moving into a new role anyway. Yeah. And I had a very similar conversation with a friend at the weekend about her journey through that, of thinking, well, the only way people are actually going to be vulnerable with me is when I'm vulnerable with them. And it was actually, quite a big life event that happened for her that meant she had to be vulnerable with them. And she saw the power of that. And actually, that's then something that she's really developed and leaned into as part of her leadership style. But I think it's a really, really important point. We can't expect others to do what we're not willing to do ourselves.
100%. And it's scary because you don't know how they're going to react, right? Yeah. They're going to say, you should have all the answers. You're my manager. But at the end of the day, I think coming in with it with honesty and transparency, no matter how the reaction is, I don't think I've ever gotten a negative reaction from being honest and transparent. I think that's the best way to approach anything in life.
Yeah. And who does have all the answers, right? I think actually showing how you think about problem solving is more powerful than saying, actually, I've got all the answers, because we know nobody has. So
yeah. And I think one valuable thing is when a team knows that their manager doesn't have all the answers, they're more likely to provide suggestions or recommendations. So it really helps build credibility, not only with you, but with your team as well. It goes both ways.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Really kind of leans into building that safe environment for people to voice their views and opinions. You talked as well about expectation setting, which I know we talked about at the start in terms of manager expectation setting, but I think that's such an important topic. Really for just alignment about what good looks like. And then it makes everything you do as a manager after that much easier, doesn't it, in terms of managing performance and things like that as well. Do you have any more thoughts on expectation setting, how managers can do that effectively?
I would say I would let team members know basically that your expectations are a two-way street, and to hold each other accountable for those expectations. So I think it's really good to meet consistently and focus on one or two major milestones for the week, and then just follow up on that. I think being clear in your role as well really helps with setting expectations for your team, because depending on the leader's job, are you supposed to help your employees create goals? Are you supposed to manage performance reviews? It really depends on what responsibilities on that manager as well, to whether it kind of defines how deep the expectation setting goes with the employee.
Yeah.
I also think when setting expectations, it's also good to put things in writing. when you put things in writing, you can hold people accountable and actually get their sign off on it as well. It's also a good way to get feedback from them if they do have any questions. So anytime you are having a one-on-one with your employee, doing a quick synopsis in an email, just to make sure that you guys are both on the same page, I think that does wonders for setting expectations and follow through.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, actually, in terms of, I think we've all been in meetings where we think we've left with the same understanding of what's happened, and then something will happen that results in a conversation. You realize actually you had different interpretations. So a way to kind of solidify that alignment. But then your second point, I think, is so critical in that you've got to keep them alive. There's no point in discussing it once, writing them once, and never referring back to them. They should drive a lot of the conversations you're having in your one-to-ones, how people are doing against those expectations, how you gather feedback around that. It's that keeping it alive throughout the process and not being a one-time activity.
Right, definitely. Yeah, and I would say another thing that I think about with first-time leaders is not establishing that foundation of trust with their team. So you expect your team to trust you, but you haven't built the trust with them yet. And you don't have the ability to delegate to them. And so as a first-time leader, you're acting as a worker bee, essentially, because you're still in that individual contributor mindset. You have a lot more on your plate now, but you kind of put the leadership responsibilities to the side because you think, doing this is going to take me 2 minutes. If I delegate it to Bob, it's going to take him 5 minutes. I'm going to do it for myself. So I think I've been stressing this the whole time, building trust, having that transparency and communication. I think it plays into being able to effectively delegate work to your team as a leader, and having that foundation of trust built so that you do feel empowered to delegate to them. That's one of the things I struggled with when I was a leader is delegating work to my team, because I was like, I know I can do this better, but that's not a good thing. That's not a good attitude to have.
Again, a really common theme that comes up in the conversations I'm having is that fear of letting go to some extent.
Yeah.
You're being asked to stop doing the thing that probably got you into this role in the first place, whether that's the right way to get into a manager role or not. Right. You're being asked to let go of that thing and actually then empower others to do the thing that you can do yourself. And it's a very different mindset, isn't it, in how you think about the value that you're delivering as an individual. And as you say, by keeping the work to yourself, you're not empowering your team, you're not helping them grow, you're not helping them learn, which is all of the things that actually you're now accountable for doing effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it also, I think by not empowering them, they will start resenting you, to be honest. It creates a negative loop. So I remember I had a leader who never wanted to give me any work. I felt stifled and I felt like I could be contributing so much more than I was. But there was just not that trust there for my capability. And finally, I approached the leader and I was like, hey, can you delegate can I try to do this for a certain period of time? Like, can I just do this job for a week? No strings attached. And then I just want your feedback on it. Like if I do it well, like I would love to take ownership of this task. If I don't do it well, I would love feedback from you on how I can do it better or where I'm falling short, so that moving forward, I can take this off of your plate because I'm here to help you. And I see you're struggling, and I have capacity. So, there's a disconnect here. And at the end of the day, it worked out. I became a right-wing woman for her. And, she was passing work to me and vice versa. And we had a much better relationship after that difficult conversation.
Well, good on you for having that conversation as well, because that's probably another topic we could delve into at some point around have those challenging conversations and manage up. But while we stay on our current topic, what are some of the common pitfalls and challenges that you see first-time managers fall into that you can maybe give people a heads up to try and avoid?
Yeah, I think just bouncing off of what we were just talking about, it's managers who are too afraid to have challenging conversations with their team. So, avoiding conflict. I think as a leader, it's important to understand that you're going to have difficult conversations with your team regarding performance, behavior, just expectations. That's one thing that you can come at with empathy. So when a new leader has to have a difficult conversation with a subordinate, I think starting the conversation by saying, hey, so-and-so, I don't want to have this conversation. This is a really challenging conversation for me. However, I think this is going to benefit you, and I think it's going to benefit the team and organization as a whole. And then go into the topic. So that is one thing that I feel like new managers really struggle with, and perhaps try to have HR have the difficult conversation with the employee instead of them.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I won't get started on that, but I will say I'm a firm believer managers should manage their teams, not HR, which I think you probably feel the same about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not here to do the dirty work. I'm here to coach you through the dirty work because you're making the decision at the end of the day. But I think, once a new leader understands how to navigate that difficult conversation, it becomes easier and easier the more you do it. And again, it's a science. Like, you can have a difficult conversation with empathy and still get the point across. Yeah.
Well, you've leaned massively there into one of my favorite topics, which is kindness. I'm a big believer in managing people. Whatever it is you need to do can be done with kindness. And I think the kindest thing you can do to somebody is give them clarity and honesty. And that is honesty that they're not doing the best job or their behavior is not acceptable.
Yeah.
You have to lean into it, that the harder thing and the unkind thing is not doing that, not giving clarity, withholding. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's that. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for people with this myself. I've had to learn a lot throughout my career to be able to lean into those challenging conversations. And a lot of it came from witnessing when it's not done. The impact is so much greater. And actually then the conversation you have to have is a million times harder than if you just had that one that felt a little bit uncomfortable in the early stages of the challenges.
Yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree. Those challenging conversations are so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, go ahead.
I was going to say also, I mean, you're saying one of something that's near and dear to your heart is kindness. I think, again, going back to the fear tactics and trying to lead with fear to get your team to respect you, I think that's a very ineffective leadership strategy, if you want to call it a strategy. I think leading with kindness, empathy, understanding, transparency, I think that's all really, really important, even when you're overwhelmed, because I mean, it's challenging to go from being an individual contributor to being a people leader. Like, let's just put it out there. I think that's one of the hardest things to do. It's one of the hardest transitions that a person can do, because you're not only responsible for your work product, you're responsible for other people's work product now. And so sometimes you may feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you may feel like you have to spend so much time with your team, you can't focus on your own work. But, I think trying to lead with kindness and empathy first is going to help you become a successful leader versus letting your emotions get the best of you when you are facing those difficult times.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about leadership styles and, being clear on what your leadership style is. And there are times I think it can be important to be able to flex outside of that, but knowing what your core fundamental leadership style is so powerful, isn't it? Maybe that's something else for first time managers to really spend time thinking about, is yeah, what is my management style? Who am I as a manager? And how do I then behave in certain situations, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all managers, all people leaders should really do introspection before stepping into the role. And I know that's not realistic, especially in a small organization that doesn't have as much tools as maybe a large corporation does, but really introspecting and seeing, you know, do I have the emotional capacity to even do this job? um, am I able to spend the time with these employees that I need to, and give them the coaching and the feedback that they deserve? I think you hit the nail on the head. Understanding your leadership style, and then learning about the other different leadership styles so that you can pivot when it's appropriate. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think some of the other challenges, particularly in small businesses, which is an area that we both have spent a lot of our time and care quite passionately about, is that lack of support network sometimes. So we talked right at the start, actually, that often there might not be a HR team, or if there is, it might be a standalone person, but also there might not be a load of other managers that are experienced managers. I think one of the common themes that I'm sure you've seen as well, and I've seen in all of the startups I've been in, is people progress into these quite senior titles quite quickly because they've done a great job, they know the business, and it's not a bad thing at all, but they don't then have the framework and the community of other people doing those things around them. And I think that can be really challenging. One of the reasons we're building Impactful People to help with that. But I'd love, are there any particular resources that you love going to that you think can be really beneficial for people if they're in a situation where maybe they feel a bit isolated in their role?
Honestly, LinkedIn. I know it sounds silly, but I think LinkedIn has given me such a great community. Just as a first-time people leader, when I was a first-time people leader, just going on there and following others that I look up to. Also, there's a handful of books that I would recommend, just to help train you up on what a great leader does look like. There's The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. Have you heard of that one?
I have. I read that. I actually, my first head of role, this is how to do it well if you're a company. My first head of role, my company sent that book before I joined which also put a little bit of pressure on me. I was like, oh my God, do I need to nail all of this in my first 90 days? But actually it was really good to help me think about how to approach those first 90 days and what I should be thinking about. So yeah. I recommend.
It's such a great one. Also, FYI is a really great resource. It's for your improvement. I forget who it's by. It's on my shelf right here.
Don't worry, we can always add a link in under the video after.
That would be great. That's a great resource. But in terms of getting community, I really do believe in LinkedIn and the power of finding the people, especially like-minded thinkers on LinkedIn. It's a great way to network with other managers, and you can find people in your industry as well. So dealing with similar problems that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally believe in the power of community just because of how impactful it's been for me in my career as well. And I think particularly in small businesses, it can be quite isolating and lonely at times. So yeah, having other people around you that having similar experiences that can share learning, really, really powerful. So yeah, agree.
Yeah. Do you know any other communities out there for leaders? I'd love to hear your take on it too.
Oh, there's quite a few. Well, so shameless plug. That's exactly what we're building at Impactful People, aimed at those in startups, first-time people managers as well as leaders. So yeah, feel free to come check out what we're doing. There are also a number of others. One of the reasons I started Impactful People, though, was a lot of them I found were aimed at very senior leaders. So it was either founders, co-founders, and exco, which is great. And they felt a bit exclusive in that you needed to be at a certain level to be able to get the support. What I've struggled to find is communities aimed at first-time people managers. There's some really great Slack communities for HR people, HR people. We've touched on a few of them before, and I'll add a couple of links. There's some new ones coming down the pipeline, so I'll add some links to them as well. And I'm also part of the Open Org community, which I think I mentioned previously. Another one I massively recommend. I joined that through a course bootcamp that I'm doing, accreditation that I'm doing with them, but they've recently opened up their community more broadly, which is really aimed at people in startup communities that really believe in transparency, which is obviously a big common theme of what we've been talking about today. I massively advocate for them and absolutely recommend people check them out.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, and I've learned maybe the hard way and hopefully save people a bit of time, is some of the communities out there are great, but massive. And I absolutely have found more value in the communities that are 1,000 people and under. I joined one the other week that was like 35,000 people. And oh my God, it's just notification overload. And trying to find the thing that's valuable for you is really hard. So all the big company names that are, you know, I'm sure it's the right place for some people. I personally find those smaller communities that are really active on the things that I care about, that have that same passions and interests, are the most valuable for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I even think so. What I've done in the HR communities myself is reaching out to perhaps one or two individuals and asking them if they'd be interested in being my mentor, because our values are aligned. Especially as a new leader or a new people leader, if you can find someone, they don't necessarily have to be a management title. Leadership comes in all titles. It's really a personality / way of thinking. But having a mentor can be very impactful and very helpful to navigate just through those situations that you've never encountered before. That I think that would be extremely valuable for a first-time leader.
I could not agree more with that as well. I believe in community mentorship are two of the most important things, I think, to help you grow and develop.
Yeah.
And say they are things that I still use in my career today. When I don't have them, that's the times I start to feel like I'm going crazy.
Yeah, and just I need a sounding board no matter what. And I know that leaders need a sounding board too. So just even having a person that you feel confident in and just someone you can confide in, maybe outside of the organization, would be a little better. Just to talk through things with them, especially if you're in a startup and you don't have an HR department. If you don't feel comfortable talking to others, senior leadership in your organization, finding someone outside of there that you can have those conversations with is very, very valuable.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely. And just make sure you don't feel alone. I think that's what it all comes back to, isn't it? It's not feeling alone and isolated, and there are people who can help and want to help. So. Yeah. So we've talked through quite a lot of things, and I feel like we could probably make about 28 of these episodes. But I would love to know what would be the key, like, top 3 takeaways you would like anyone listening to take away from this conversation.
Yeah, that's great. We have gone through a lot. This has been an amazing conversation, and thank you so much again for the opportunity. This has been wonderful. Key takeaways. I would say the 3 most important things for first-time managers is get clear on what your responsibilities are, what the scope of your responsibilities are. Don't use fear as a tactic to lead. Maybe lean in to learn what leadership styles are and what you would tend towards, and then learn about the others so you can leverage them appropriately. And then also just being clear and transparent with your team.
Awesome. Love it. All super, super valuable. Thank you. So I have one last question before I let you go, which is if you could hear us talk about any of the topics on here, or if there's someone you absolutely love that you'd love us to try and get hold of and have a conversation with, what topics would you like?
So I have so many, but I think something relevant that is happening now is Gen Z and millennials in organizations starting to get into leadership roles. So just how they are how they're leading based on their experiences. I know with Gen Zers, which myself included, we're a little bit less, we don't want to start fights. We're not very vocal. We just kind of do what we have to do, put our heads down. I think millennials, Gen Zers are a lot more vocal about what they want. They're not afraid to ask for what they want. So I think just understanding the difference in leadership and talking about their styles coming into the workforce would be very interesting. And then remote workers being disengaged. I would say, are remote workers more likely to look for other jobs and leave? And how does that impact the workplace as it is?
Yeah, both very, very interesting topics. I will do my best to hunt out some speakers, cover those off and let you know. Well, Merna, honestly, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights and thoughts.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.